Mephibosheth. You did well. It's good. There you go. I said it so many times I couldn't get it wrong. Probably still will. Okay. So I'll be honest with you this morning. This passage has been a tough one for me to study. I managed to get out of Exodus, by the way, so we're not going through Exodus anymore. Praise Jesus. And now we're in Leviticus. No, it took a little bit of time away from my own personal teaching plan, and I started looking around at different passages that have kind of hit me hard lately, and this one's stuck. This one's been right there for different reasons, but I honestly don't feel like I'm really the right person to be up here preaching this message because of what the account is actually describing. We're going to talk about Mephibosheth and his disabilities and what he cannot do, and that hasn't happened in my life. I can praise God and thank him for my healthy sons and a healthy family. So I can't come from that perspective. But I can come from the perspective of needing a Jonathan in my life, and being David, and being a Jonathan and needing a David in my life. And what does that mean afterwards? And what does that mean once those people are gone? But I'm confident this morning that God's got something that he wants to teach us, you guys and me. Because this has been a month of kind of study for me going through this, and I've unpacked some stuff, and I was preaching at my wife last night. You can ask her, and she got some stuff out of it, and I was like, I didn't think about that, and I just add that in as well, and that's just kind of what happens. God opens your eyes every single time you read the Bible, and you get something fresh from it every single time. So I'm praying that for you guys this morning. Maybe this is a familiar account for you. Maybe this is something that you've read before. Maybe it's not, but I'm praying that something fresh will come from this. So I don't know about you, but I don't know how many of you guys have got a Jonathan in your life. Not just a person called John. I've got a brother called John, right? He's my older brother, less handsome, taller, but but a Jonathan, like a David to Jonathan situation, right? I don't know how many of you guys can turn around and you say you don't just have a best friend, you have a soul friend. Someone who just connects with you, someone that you love. Who has that? Ever since I've been a Christian, ever since I've read the Bible, ever since I read this account, I have longed for a Jonathan in my life. I've cried out for a Jonathan in my life. I've wanted that type of friendship because it's so important. And it's really funny because all my Jonathans typically are at church, right? You guys, you know that I've got friends here. Brother Scott's a dear friend of mine. Pastor Josh is a dear friend of mine. I've got a list of people who I can rely on in my life. But a couple of Sundays ago, when I ended up in ER from my tonsils exploding and going crazy in my throat here and not being able to, speak properly and breathe properly, and I'm on my own in the ER, I'm thinking, all my Jonathans are at church right now. Who do I call? So I reached out to my Jonathan, my outside Jonathan, my buddy Forrest. And Forrest is an amazing man because, one, he serves the country. He's in the military. And I'm very proud and privileged to be his friend. But two, he said, I'll skip church this morning to come and sit by you. I don't know about you. It's one of those things when you find people in your life that will do that. I know I have a group of friends here, a group of Jonathans who I could turn around to and say, I need help. And they say, when and where and how. Let me be there. And it makes me emotional to think that because it's taken me a long time to find these Jonathans. It's taken me a long time to be able to have that in my life. So this morning, in my opinion, we're going to be looking at one of the sweetest friendships in the whole Bible. One of the most tender, loving friendships in the whole Bible. And as I said, ever since I became a Christian, I've wanted this in my life. I wanted some form of this friendship in my life. And I'm so thankful to be able to say that now, that I've got that. But we can read in 1 Samuel 18:1, it says, And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. They're no longer just friends, they are knitted together. They are close, they are best friends, they are soul friends. But Jonathan was King Saul's son. Saul was the enemy of David. The same Saul David was hiding from back in the cave. If you want more teaching on that, I did a sermon on that based called Time in the Cave, when David had to sneak up and cut off a bit of Saul's robe there, and you can check that out if you want. But this is the same situation here. You have David's enemy, and David's just so happened to be best friends with his enemy's son. This guy's dad wanted to kill David. Let's talk about awkward birthday parties for a second, right? Let's talk about having sleepovers and no trying to kill him tonight, Dad. We're just trying to watch a movie, okay? It could get pretty awkward. But like any best friends, these guys made a pact. And I'm not talking about a pinky promise on the playground, right? I'm not talking about something kind of minor. They made a covenant with one another, a promise to one another. And we can read about the nature of this first covenant in 1 Samuel 20, and again in chapter 23. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you right now. That's because there's a lot of ground to cover before we get to Mephibosheth. But it's really important you understand why there is a care and a love for Mephibosheth beforehand, okay? So in chapter 23, when Jonathan warns David his dad is trying to kill him again, and gives him time to hide, then the pursuit begins. Saul tries to kill David again. David spares Saul a couple of times. Go read it. It's an amazing account of forgiveness, of grace, of mercy, of when you think maybe David should have just taken the hit and been like, I'm just going to kill Saul now because he's in a cave, there's no one around. He doesn't do it. He offers mercy instead of aggression and anger. That's an amazing thing to think about, and how we can apply that to our lives is an incredible thing as well. But for the sake of this morning and time, I know Elder Don sped through the announcements, but I'm going to try and not take those extra 10, 15 minutes. We're just going to fast forward to our main teaching today, 2 Samuel 9. But we read about the death of King Saul and Jonathan just before this in 1 Samuel chapter 31. And that's really important because it sets up what's going to happen next. Okay, so we're here, 2 Samuel 9, and that's going to introduce Mephibosheth, and it's going to introduce the kindness of David and what he's wanting to do. But just before that, the reason why there needs to be kindness and there needs to be grace and mercy is because Mephibosheth's dad and dad's dad have died, have been killed. That means he's next in line to the throne. That means he should be king. That means there should be a lot of tension. So we're going to jump ahead to 2 Samuel 9. If you've got that in your Bibles open still, that's fantastic. I'm going to pray, then we're going to dive into this, okay? Lord Jesus, I just want to thank you for this morning. God, thank you for this time where we get to study your word. God, help us to be able to focus on your truth and your words here. Lord Jesus, let mine get out of the way. God, help me to speak your words this morning. Let your message stand true, and I pray in your name. Amen. Okay, Elder Don's already read the majority of the section of scripture here, but we're going to go through verse by verse. I like to do this with the teenagers. I like to kind of dissect it all, pull out any key things that I kind of think are really awesome or really cool or kind of quirky, and hopefully we can get through this together. But I think it's really important that, again, we remember the context of everything, the kindness and the love and the covenant between Jonathan and David when we talk about David and Mephibosheth. So we're going to look at verse 1. And it says this, and David said, is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him the kindness for Jonathan's sake? The amazing thing here is, again, what we just said is Jonathan and Saul have just died. They've just been killed. Grief is grief. Grief's a tough thing. Grief's a hard thing. I don't know about you guys. I imagine everyone here has had some loss in their life. And how you grieve and how you deal with that looks completely different to everyone else. But David's just lost his best friend, Jonathan. He's just lost his best friend. And my initial reaction, to be honest with you, is not to think about anyone else in that time. I'll be thinking about me. How do I get through this? How do I cope with this time? How do I get out of this, whatever situation it is? Because I want to wallow. I want to be there. I want to stay there for a while, cry. I don't cry often. I'm not really a crier, but when I'm really sad about something, I'll cry. Blame people, point the finger, If that person did something different, then this wouldn't have happened. Or maybe even blame myself. If I was just there and I could have just texted them, or I could have, whatever it is. Be angry. Go on a little bit of a rampage. That's what old teenage Jamie would have done. Go outside and see how many people I could fight. Get that anger out. Grief comes out in different forms, but grief is brutal. It's a really sad thing. And thankfully, we can see a wonderful picture of God, the Father, in David's response to this deeply personal loss. We see the Father's heart for the hurting, for the vulnerable, for the outcast. And David wants to do something. He wants to do something. He's moved to action. Out of love for his friend. Out of love for his friend Jonathan. Despite all that's happened between him and Saul. You can imagine that. You can imagine in that time, he could have said, you know what, David and Jonathan, best friends. But you know what the issue was? His dad kept butting in all the time. There were so many issues with that family. I just kind of want to move past that now. But David doesn't do that. He doesn't want to linger in there. He's moved on from that, and he's saying, actually, I want to do something despite all the anger, despite the hunting down, despite the aggression, despite the jealousy from the father. I'm best friends with the son, and I want to do something. I want to do something. What can I do for God, and what can I do for others? This isn't a normal response for a brand new king, okay? Expectations of a new king are pretty high. You've come in and you've just taken over a kingdom. You better be ready to do something. And amazingly enough, there was this whole thing that would happen with kings, and we see that in Daniel when Daniel's kingdom gets taken over, and he gets given a new name, and people get given new names, and their culture gets wiped out, and they get given different traditions, and the king takes over, and he just does what he wants to do. And you can read it throughout the whole Old Testament, and it happens nowadays as well. Think about what happens in nature. When a new lion, the king of the pack, the tribe, comes in, what does it do? It wipes out all of the other cubs from the previous alpha. Why? Because he wants his family line to continue. Humans do this and have done this for a very long time, but it's on display everywhere. So the reaction for a king would typically go to wipe out anyone connected with the prior ruler. Are you part of the bloodline? Could you come and challenge me for the throne? Could you come and try and take over at any point in time? Because if that's true, you're gone. I'm getting rid of you. We're not going to have this issue because you're not going to be alive. And that's what they would do. But David went against the grain. He went against the culture, against what was expected of him by the rest of the world, and asked these two great questions. What can I do for God, and what can I do for others? Do for the family of my enemy? And even a third question, what can I do to honor my best friend? What can I do? That I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake. This word kindness is based on the Hebrew word chesed. Basically, that's what it says in English, but chesed, spelled with a K sometimes, spelled with just an H sometimes, spelled with a C sometimes. And there's been so many different pronunciations. I'm just an English guy trying to say it, right? I'm going to get this wrong. But the meaning of it is incredible. This mercy and loving kindness pushed together, all in one. And that's what he's trying to say here. How can I show mercy, loving kindness all together for any one part of this family, for Jonathan's sake? And David did this because he remembered his relationship and prior covenant with Jonathan in 1 Samuel 20. His actions were not only based on feelings, but based on the promise of a covenant, which is an incredible thing to think about. We have 1 Samuel 20, verses 13 to 16. I'm just going to read those very quickly. The Lord do so much and much more to Jonathan, but if it please my father to do thee evil, then I will show it to thee, and send thee away, but thou mayest go in peace, and the Lord be with thee, as he hath been with my father. And thou shalt not only while yet I live, show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also thou shalt not cut off the kindness for my house forever. That's the key part here, that you will not cut off the kindness to my house forever. He's saying, David, don't treat my family bad. Don't cut that kindness off. Just because you're kind to me, just because you love me, don't forget who I am when you look at my family once I'm gone. Right? And I think that's an incredible thing, again, because what he's saying is, remember what we have. Remember this friendship. No, not when the Lord have cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. Verse 16, so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. You shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. That's the key part here. Jonathan was aware of the dynamic between new kings and old kings. Jonathan knew that one day David and his descendants would rule over Israel. And he wanted a promise that David and his descendants would not kill or mistreat his descendants for political gain. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. Jonathan and David agreed to care for one another. To care for one another. Jonathan agreed to care for David in the face of Saul's threats. My dad's coming after you again, David. I'm going to give you a heads up. Go hide. Go run. This is what he's thinking. And David agreed to care for Jonathan and his family in the future. And we can see that David fulfilled this promise in 2 Samuel chapter 9, what we're going through right now, and in 2 Samuel chapter 21:7. But it's great to be able to see a fulfillment of promises in a world that's full of backstabbing, in a world where people are just trying to get up on each other, one on up. I'm better than you, and I'm going to use you as a platform. No, this promise was fulfilled. And it was a good promise. Verses 2-4. I'm going to have them up here. I don't expect you to be able to read these very clearly because it's kind of small print. But I'll read it here. And there was the house of a Saul, a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, the king, and said unto him, art thou Ziba? And he said, thy servant is he. And the king said, is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan have yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he is in the house of Machah, the son of Ammiel in Lodabar. So David learns that there is a descendant of Saul still living and currently residing at a servant's house. Where is he? He's in Lodabar. Where's Lodabar? I don't know. He's in Lodabar, though. He's at Ziba's house in Lodabar. And the kindness of God, this phrase is key to understanding David's motivation in this whole chapter, in this whole section of Scripture. David wanted to show someone else the same kindness God showed to him. So please don't miss this. The kindness that he's trying to pass on here is not one that's from his own heart. It's something that he's experienced that he is now trying to pass on. We have all had that same kindness. We've all had that same forgiveness, that same grace, that same mercy, and we should be trying to pass that on because that's what we've experienced. And what good news for David. There is someone in the line of Jonathan that's still alive. And he wants to do something to honor his friend and out of the love for the Lord. And there's still someone that he can do this for. I can still do it. There's a descendant of Jonathan left. And this is really good news. This is really good news. There is still a son of Jonathan, but the tone changes here. There's still a son. Great! I can totally look after him. We can make him a part of my kingdom. He can be around. He can help look after the place. I can treat him as a prince. I can look after him, bring him in. But he is lame in his feet. There is one, but I don't know what we can do here, David. I don't know. In 2 Samuel 4:4, we can read how Mephibosheth is tragically injured. It's a heartbreaking story. Again, I'd encourage you to go back and read it all. But basically, after Saul and Jonathan have died, King Saul's just passed away, Jonathan's now died, Mephibosheth's nurse is fleeing for safety. And she drops him, leaving him permanently crippled, lame in both feet. And at this point in the story, it would be very easy to point the finger and blame her, but she was doing the right thing. Because again, I've already told you what the expectations for new kings were. There's a new king in town. He's going to come for Mephibosheth. He's going to come for anyone in the bloodline of Jonathan, anyone in the bloodline of Saul. You need to get him out of here. So she was trying to protect this innocent 5-year-old boy. And this was a horrible situation of loss that got very, very worse. It's a tragedy. But the good news remains that there's still a son. There is still a son of Jonathan, and the king is seeking him out. And the king wants to meet him and know him. I knew your dad. I want to know you. I loved your dad. Let me love you. But Mephibosheth doesn't know that. He doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know anything about David. He just thinks, new king, lots of problems. The king wants to know him. The king wants to know you. Do you know that this morning? But Mephibosheth, what a name. One, pronunciation is shocking sometimes, but what a name as we can translate it, from the mouth of shame. From the mouth of shame. And it gets worse. We mentioned Lodabar. He lives in Lodabar. And I don't know if you know anything about Lodabar, but it literally can be translated as the place with no pasture, with nothing going on. It's a place of nothing. So he's living in a place of nothing as a nobody in nowhere, right? He's lame in both feet. He's a poor man. It's a sad situation. Mephibosheth had the right to the throne as Saul and Jonathan were dead. He was a son of the firstborn son of the king, and all the other heirs were dead. In a political sense, David could have seen Mephibosheth as a rival or a threat. That's what a new king would have done. That's why they would have got rid of them. You're going to try and oppose me later on in life when you get to an age, when you get to an ability, or maybe when you muster up enough people to try and take over, you're going to have that strength behind you because you're a bloodline to the old king. He could have been seen as a rival of a threat. But he's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, and Mephibosheth doesn't even have his own house. He's a prince. He should be king, but he's living in Lodabar, middle of nowhere, place of no pasture, doesn't even own his own house. It tells you the low station in life that he has. It's a sad story. It's a tragedy. Verses 5 and 6. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, has come into David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold thy servant. Then King David sent and brought him out of the house. Can you imagine that? Hello? Yeah, excuse me, can you open the door? Well, I don't know. Who are you? And we're from the king. How'd you find me? That's probably what I'd be thinking. How'd you find me? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Oh, the king, you say? I don't know. I'm a little bit busy right now. Can you come back later? Well, the king really wants to meet you. Yeah, I'm sure he does. Right? I know what happens with new kings. I know what happens when things go down like this. But he must have been terrified when messages from David knocked at his door and demanded that he came to see the king, to meet the king. In the back of his mind, he must have anticipated this day when King David would come for him, just like other kings would have. And again, wipe out the family line of the previous king. But the knock on the door also meant that Mephibosheth was no longer hidden from the world, from David. His efforts to try and slink away and just have been undone. There was security when he was hidden. He was able to hide. He could feel secure in that. But now suddenly he's fully exposed. So Mephibosheth was no longer hidden. And once he sees David, he fell on his face and prostrated himself, or he reverenced, right? And did reverence to David. You realize this is a lame man. And the picture I have here has crutches, and we don't know how he would have gotten around. Otherwise, maybe he had people helping him. But to lower himself than the already low position that he had would have been basically face on the floor, showing reverence like that. Mephibosheth had a lot of fear in this situation because up to this point, David and Mephibosheth never had a relationship. But he still shows reverence. You're the king. I'm still going to bow down. In verses 7 and 8, David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee the kindness for Jonathan, then my father's sake. Thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. Wow. From fear to this incredible promise, right? And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant that thou shouldst look upon such a dead dog as I am? But David's first thing to say right here is, fear not, do not fear. I'm not here to kill you. I'm not here to kill you. Some of my favorite words in the whole Bible, do not fear. It sounds real familiar, right? We can read that a lot in the Bible. Do not be afraid, for God is with you. Do not be afraid. There's lots of verses we can put in there, but I will surely show you the kindness for Jonathan, your father's sake. David made a covenant with Jonathan in 1 Samuel 20, as I've already said, promising to show kindness to the descendants of Jonathan. And David gladly made good on his promise, even though Jonathan was gone. It's amazing you think, I will fear not. Well, why? Don't just say don't be scared, because I've seen movies before and the bad guy always says, you can trust me, or don't be scared, man, it's all good. Then something bad happens, all right? Maybe Mephibosheth hasn't seen any movies like that, but he instantly backs it up by saying, fear not. I'm going to show you kindness because of who your dad is to me, who he was to me, who he is to me, and who you are to me through him. And that's a really beautiful image. That's a really incredible image. Like I said, I have Jonathans in my life now. I have Davids in my life right now that if I were to pass away, I know they will continue to invest in my kids because of who I am to them, but also who my kids are to them. And that's really important to me, and I pray that we all have people like that in our lives. But David made this covenant with Jonathan, and David gladly made good on the promise. He didn't back out. He didn't just say, hey, I'm now king. This is below me. He's saying, no, I'm going to back up what I said, and I'm going to do what I said. Your dad's gone. He doesn't even know if I'm going to do it or not, but you know what? I promised him, and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm not backing down. I love you because I love your dad. He says, I'll surely show you the kindness for Jonathan, thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul, thy father. David simply promised Mephibosheth that he would receive what was his. You know, you were meant to be king. This is your stuff. This is yours now. And Mephibosheth knew about these lands all along, but I think there was a fear there to try and take them or to try and take ownership of them. But David went against all custom in showing kindness to an heir of the former king. And this amazing promise, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. Continually. This isn't saying, hey, I'm going to put on this grand feast here and you guys can come for one big feast. It's going to be the best meal ever. You're going to have a great time and then you can just head on out afterwards. No, this is continually. This is day after day after day after day. I'm not kicking you out. You're welcome here. You're living in Lodabar in the middle of nowhere. You're being a nobody in nowhere. I'm asking you to be a someone at my table for the rest of your life. That's what Jesus does for us. That's what Jesus does for us. You don't need to be a nobody living in nowhere, doing nothing anymore, because Jesus is saying, you know what? I'm inviting you, Mr. Nobody, Mrs. Nobody, to come and be at my table. And then suddenly you're a somebody because you're with me. And that's an amazing promise, an amazing thing that God's done for us. You shall eat bread at my table continually. This went far beyond giving Mephibosheth what was rightly his, because now he's in the presence of the king. He gave Mephibosheth the honor of a close relationship, not even just being in the presence, but an opportunity to be in a close relationship with the king. In Luke 22:30, we see a very similar promise is given to the followers of Jesus. And Jesus told the disciples that they would eat and drink at his table in heaven. If you follow me, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. And what is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I? Mephibosheth didn't feel worthy of such generosity. He didn't feel worthy of that. You're offering me all these things, but didn't I just tell you where I was and who I am and what I can't even do anything for you. Why would you do this for me? Living in Lodabar made Mephibosheth think of himself as unworthy. Being a lame man made him think himself unworthy. Being a nobody, living in nowhere, unable to do things, made him feel unworthy. But David looked past that and said, you're somebody to me. You're somebody. Jesus does that for us. Jesus does that for us. We are somebody to Jesus, even when we feel unworthy, even when we feel like we're nobody, lost somewhere that no one knows about. Jesus says, well, you're someone to me, and you matter to me, so I'm going to give you this generosity. I'm going to give you this opportunity, and I want you to be at my table, eating with me, the King. Guys, I want you all to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be stuffing my face across from Jesus. This is going to be an amazing thing. There's going to be this long table, and there's going to be seats there, name place tags right there, and I want every single seat to be filled with the people of that name tag, right? The sad truth is that's not going to happen. Not everyone accepts Jesus. Guys, if you haven't accepted Jesus, just think about what's on offer here. Think about that meal. Think about that forever in eternity with Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. That's what's on offer here. And David goes above and beyond, and he says, you therefore and your sons and your servants shall work the land for him. And I think this is an amazing thing. We're in the next section right here. Sorry, I've jumped ahead. There we are, verses 9 to 12. Then the king called to Ziba, the Saul's servant, and said unto him, I've given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul and to his house. I've given it back to him. I'm not holding it away. He can have it all. It's his. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him, or shall work the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then said Ziba unto the king, according to all that my lord the king have commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. I'm going to do what you're saying. I'm going to do this for you. So Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. You and your sons and your servants shall serve him now. So in addition to the land, David gave Mephibosheth servants to work the land. He couldn't do the work himself. He was lame. So David filled that need. He lost the throne, so David made him feel like a prince. You're going to have your own servants. You're going to have your own land. You're going to have your own house. You've lived nowhere with being a nobody for so long now, you need to know that you're somebody in my eyes, and I'm going to give you that position, that placement. Also, the food that you get is going to be for your family because you're eating with me from now on. Your family are going to be taken care of, but you're eating with me. I think that's an amazing, amazing thing to think about. Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants, and the mention of the sons and the slaves in his house was to show that Mephibosheth would be honored with an abundance of servants. He would have 35 people looking after him here. That's like royalty. That's an amazing amount of people just looking after you right there. David gave land, servants, and much more. We can think about the land and being like, land's important, especially right now. I want to buy a house. I want to buy a house with lots of land. Why? Because I want it to be mine. It's my property. It's my kingdom. I know where my lines are, and I can see as people are coming and going, and hey, this is my area, not yours. Right? Servants, to make sure everything's good, kept nice, looking nice and clean. That's what my kids are for me. No, in my kingdom. But seriously, like the royalty would have these people looking after them. So they have 35 people now looking after him on his land. You're getting your position back that you didn't really deserve, but through David's kindness here, he's giving it back to you. And then much more, that position at my table. I love the fact that it doesn't stop with land. And then I love the fact it doesn't stop with servants. But then I adore the fact that he's saying, actually, you're not even going to have to eat the food that you're going to be bringing in. That's to look after yours. But you get to eat with me at this table. You get to be here for my meal times, for my grand feasts, the king's food. That's what you're going to be eating. You're going to be treated like a king's son. That's a beautiful thing to think about. He gave him a seat at the table. He shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth was probably happy to know that David wasn't going to kill him, right? When he got that knock on the door, really glad I answered. What would have happened if I didn't, right? But then to go on top of that, to be like, he didn't just answer the door and bring him in front of David. David blessed him and blessed him and blessed him and showed so much kindness. It's an amazing thing. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And through that, the name of Jonathan was preserved. That's an incredible thing to think about as well. The name of Jonathan was preserved. We can see this in 1 Chronicles 8, 34 to 35, and 1 Chronicles 9, 40 to 41. What's happening here is David is allowing that line to continue. When everything else in culture would say, wipe them out, you've got a lame prince right here, or should be king. He's an easy target, get rid of him. But now he's got a son? Well, that son's going to come back and try and take the throne. I promise you that's what's going to happen. He's going to come, you need to get rid of him. That's what culture would have said. But David's saying, you know what? No, actually, I'm going to invite the guy who should be on this throne right now to sit with me and eat at my table. And I'm also going to make sure his son is so fed, because they don't even have to eat the food themselves. They're going to eat my food, and all that food's going to go to his family. He's making sure the family carries on. He makes sure that David's name is preserved and continued. That's an amazing friendship. But that's an amazing promise to keep as well. Verse 13 and application today. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table and was lame on both his feet. Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem. He dwelt in Jerusalem. No longer hiding in fear of the king, the descendant of Saul now lived openly among the people. People of David's kingdom, right? He dwelt there. He no longer had to go back to his house in the middle of nowhere and with nothing around. He lived in Jerusalem with the king. That's an amazing turnaround. From death and destruction to being cast out to the middle of nowhere, to being at the seat of the king's table, to now dwelling in Jerusalem there. What a turnaround. And he ate continually at the king's table. No longer in poverty and estranged and divided from the king, now he had great privilege before the king. Now he had a seat. But notice he was lame still in both his feet, right? He still had his issues. Mephibosheth was still crippled. His life was far better, right? His life was far better, but he was still lame. His physical circumstances were the same, but he was a changed man because of the kindness of the king. A changed man. David's grace to Mephibosheth is a wonderful picture of God's grace to us. Because we are all like Mephibosheth, right? We're all like him. I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time hiding. I don't know about you, but I've been poor, I've been weak, I've hidden myself from the king. I've been crippled by sin. I've been fearful of judgment and people's eyes upon me. But the king still comes to us, right? We are separated from our king because of our wicked ancestors. It wasn't Mephibosheth's fault. Jonathan wasn't wicked. Jonathan was kind. He was loving. Who was Mephibosheth's wicked ancestor? It was Saul and his jealousy that drove this wedge between him and David. If there was that relationship, the nurse wouldn't have ran. If there was that relationship, the nurse wouldn't have dropped him. If there was that relationship, but there it is again. Let's point the finger at Saul, right? Someone to point the finger at grief again in loss. But we're separated from our king because of our wicked ancestors. We are separated from our king because of our deliberate actions. No one told Mephibosheth to go to Lodabar. He made his way there. right? Bless you. Our King sought us out before we ever sought him out. That's the beautiful thing of this. Before Mephibosheth turned around and said, you know what, I want an audience to King David, there was a knock at the door. Before he even thought about, hey, I've got the courage to talk to him about getting that land back, there was a knock at the door. Before Jamie ever cried out to Jesus, Jesus had pursued Jamie, right? We are all Mephibosheth in this story. We've all been there. The king's kindness is extended to us for the sake of another. The king's kindness is based on a covenant relationship. We must receive the king's kindness in humility. And even on top of that, the king returns to us what we lost in hiding from him. When we hide from the king, we start to think that we are unworthy, that we cannot be in the presence of God, that we are so low, that we are horrible, that we are disgusting, that we cannot be. Whereas Jesus is coming over here and saying, hey, I know what you truly are. Come to me and see it yourself. Don't be over here on your own. Come to me and see how I see you. That's the amazing thing to think about. Do we truly allow ourselves to see us how God sees us? As sons or daughters, as part of his family? Or do we stay over this side in the lowly, in the depression, in the sadness, in the don't look at me? I know for myself, I spend a lot of days here when really I should just be here with Jesus saying, I'm just so grateful to even get to know you. I'm just so grateful to be in a relationship with you. But we all have those patterns, right? We all go through that. We're all Mephibosheth in this story. We have the privilege of provision at the king's table. He's offering us provision. He's offering us continually being fed at the king's table. And we are received as sons at the king's table, with access to the king and fellowship with him. Do you not think that someone in David's court or close friendship group would have been like, you're going to let Mephibosheth eat at the table? What if he tries to kill you? What if he tries to poison you? What if he tries to do something in that time? But David didn't care. He's Jonathan's son. I need to love him. I will love him, and I will look after him. Access to the king and fellowship with the king. Christians, we are called also to be like David in this situation. We should seek out our enemies and seek for ways to bless them. The amazing thing about this whole account in 2 Samuel 9, chapter 1, David starts this whole thing off by saying, and David said, is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul? The guy that's tried to kill me over and over and over and over. The guy that's given me countless amounts of sleepless nights. The guy that had me hiding out in caves, that's been running for days. And the guy that's been after me ever since. He starts this all off by saying, is there any way that I can bless that house? We should care for the poor. We should care for the disabled, the vulnerable and outcasts. We should treat them like humans, with tenderness and compassion, just like Jesus would and does. We should bless others when they don't deserve it and bless some more, right? We should bless others for the sake of someone else. And we must show the kindness of God to others. Guys, we have, in our family, we have some tricky family situations. Some tricky family situations. And during studying this account of Mephibosheth, I was really challenged about how to get past those. How do I show kindness to people who don't want to be kind to me? And that is tricky. It is hard. But you know what? I thought, hey, if I open myself up and I allow something to happen here and I be the kind, good-hearted person that I'm trying to be, that I'm trying to follow Jesus, that I can be like David in this situation, and Mephibosheth can come to our table and he can eat and be happy. It didn't happen that way. Sometimes we can be kind and open and loving, and it can just be slammed on your face. But being kind and being loving and being open to these situations is what makes us more like Jesus. We're not just slamming that door and shutting it. We're trying to keep that door open. We're still trying to be a better version of Jamie than I was 10 years ago, right? So in David, in this situation, in this account here, we have a picture of the Savior, okay? In Mephibosheth, we have a picture of a sinner. But this is a beautiful, tender, kind, and loving account of what God has, will, and continue to do for all of us. I'm really thankful for that. Do not fear. We've got an invitation. There's a knock at your door. The King's asking for you. There's a seat at his table, the King's table. We're no longer talking about King David. We're talking about the King of Kings. It's a different table. This is a different situation now. The offer's still the same. Come and eat. Come and be with me in heaven. He's not just an earthly king. This is the King of Kings. He's not just a lord of a plot of land. He's the Lord of lords. He's the creator of the whole earth. He is the one who flung stars into the skies. He's the one that breathed life into every single one of us. That king, that table, that's who we're talking about now. We're not talking about an earthly sinner, a king who sins. We're talking about God, Jesus, heaven. That's what we're talking about. Because we can run for all of our lives. We can run and run and run and run and run. But we have a good, good Father in heaven who has a table and a place just for you set up, waiting for you. And that offer is there. You have to accept it. You have to accept it. We have a good Father, a good, good Father who has a seat at the table for us. Sister Nancy, would you come and play? Is that okay? Guys, as we finish here, I've got a couple of questions for you. But I just want you to think. Maybe you feel like you've been running and hiding from the King. Maybe you feel like he's your enemy for whatever reason. And maybe you don't feel good enough to be in his presence. Well, we've all been there, okay? Maybe you think he'd treat you differently if he really knew you. And what's holding you back? I want you to know that you cannot hide from the King. Jesus is here and he's waiting for you. His arms are open wide, waiting for you, for that embrace. If you're stuck in Lodabar, if you feel like a nobody from nowhere, I've got good news for you. Good news. The King wants you to come to his table. I need you to know that God is not your enemy. He's not your enemy. He is just. He's a just God. And maybe because of that, you think he's your enemy because you've done some stuff wrong. And maybe because of the complexities of this world, you need to point a finger. You need someone to blame. Like the nurse or like Saul. My friends, God is not your enemy. He loves you so much that he sent his only begotten Son to die on that old rugged cross, taking all of our sins on his shoulders. For God so loved the whole world, right? Everyone, the whole world. You don't need to be good enough. Jesus is good enough, okay? We've seen how David kept his end of the bargain and the beautiful story that comes from that. But we all know a promise unfulfilled means nothing. Okay? Just imagine for a second that David stayed stuck in his grief, that he stayed stuck there. Imagine if he never found Mephibosheth. This would be a very different story. Broken promises can cause more damage than if they had ever been promised in the first place. Broken covenants hurt people, families, marriages, spouses, children. Brokenness is a result of sin. And sin destroys everything it touches. But promises are incredibly powerful when they are taken seriously and they are fulfilled. Thankfully, these are the kind of promises God makes. David did well here but we know he's a sinner, right? He's not perfect. We can read all of his mistakes in the Bible. He's very honest about them. But that's not true of God. God always keeps his promises. 100% of the time. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but when it rains and then the sun comes out, what's still in the sky? That rainbow. From the right at the beginning. My God does not break promises. We're all invited into this covenant relationship with God. But do you know him? If not, please do not leave here with lingering questions. If you've got any questions, any doubt inside of your heart, inside of your mind right now, don't leave without asking. Let us sit down with you, stay for lunch, and we'll sit down with you and open up our Bibles and show you how you can know that heaven's your home. There's a seat at the table for you. You can know that Jesus is your Savior, heaven is your home, and there is a seat just for you. At 5 years old, we read that Mephibosheth's life didn't go the way it was supposed to go. This injury, this accident affects the rest of his life. Brothers and sisters, life often doesn't go the way we hoped it would, or the way we wanted it to. We face discouragements that leave us crippled and unable to walk, physical ailments, broken relationships. This world is full of crushed hopes and shattered dreams, but there is hope. His name is Jesus. Brothers and sisters, it is time to leave Lodabar. The King is coming to know.